Hello, everyone. 1 second, we're just doing a couple quick video updates and we should be good.
All set.
Fantastic. Well, I'll give it 30 more seconds before we do our official kickoff. But my name is Allie McDevitt. I am the Director of Marketing here at Accent. I'm joined by Laura Conway, one of our fantastic account strategists, who you are all really here to see. So I'm going to pass it off to Laura shortly. And she'll do a little bit of a quick intro on herself and her background for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of working with her. And then it will really be her show. I'll chime in with some housekeeping items towards the end. I will be helping her moderate any questions that you all have. So if you have anything, be sure to kind of just throw it right into the Q&A section and we'll pass those through. But Laura, while we let some other folks kind of trickle in, do you want to do a quick background on yourself?
Sure. So, as Allie said, I'm Laura Conway. A lot of you I've met, and if not, then it's really great to meet you. I'm sure you've worked with somebody else at Accent so far, or maybe this is your first time being exposed to Accent. So we are an elite HubSpot partner, and we work with clients to implement HubSpot for them or to re-implement and really update, new kinds of campaigns or sales processes or service processes or custom integrations with all kind of centralized around HubSpot. So my background is mostly in marketing, software, and technology specifically. But since I've been at Accent for the last 15 months, I've gotten to touch a lot of different aspects of a lot of different kinds of businesses. So ICP and ABM targeting and automation is something that I'm really passionate about because of my background in marketing, and then being able to weave it all together with sales and operations all within HubSpot is something that I've been really excited to work with some clients on so far.
Fantastic. Actually, just looking at the folks we have in the room, I think we're in a good zone to really kick things off. So I will let you take it away. And again, as anyone has questions, just send them on through.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, so here we go. So we are really here to talk about ideal customer profile targeting. So whether this is an ABM, like account-based marketing strategy that you want to employ, if you have a specific list of kinds of companies or companies specifically that you want to reach out to, or if it's a little bit more broad and you have been working on truly identifying exactly who your ideal customer is and the framework around that and targeting through automation. So I'm really passionate about automating things that make a lot of sense. So we're not looking to take the total human aspect out of this, but what we're looking to do is really automate the things that your team just doesn't need to be spending time on. So we're going to go through all of this step by step as we move along into here. So the purpose of really why we're here is there's a huge opportunity to increase your funnel volume and increase your funnel health. So, we all know that personalized messaging really helps convert leads to opportunities faster and opportunities to customers faster as well. So this whole thing is framed around growing the right kind of top of the funnel activity and moving people through your funnel at a really effective rate and with some kind of smart ways to leverage some automation. So overall, McKinsey says that personalized messaging lifts overall sales by at least 10%. That will vary, and sometimes you'll see really great success with that too. But this is really what we're kind of focusing in on, and like why a marketing team would want to stand up this kind of ICP automation. But of course, with an opportunity comes challenges. So these are probably challenges that you all face today. I know that I've faced these in the past. So number one is really target misalignment. So your CEO may want you to go after one cohort, but you as marketers recognize another cohort. Sales has a different idea of who they want to go after and who they see success with. So, a misalignment between teams and stakeholders is always a challenge that that comes up very frequently. And of course, resource constraints. Nobody has the size of the team that they truly need. So everybody's, wearing multiple hats. And whether it's a small marketing team or the lack of an SDR team or a very small one. And then, of course, if you have a relatively small sales team too, the amount of leads that you pass them is, kind of varies depending on what their bandwidth can be as well. And then, of course, system fragmentation too. So if your systems aren't fully aligned, that will always cause all kinds of issues. That will cause manual work and mistakes and, things like that too. So these are some of the most common challenges that I've run into personally and that we see our clients run into. But we've got some solutions for this with this type of campaign and setup. So what's the solution? These are kind of the three different things to really, achieve or, overcome the challenges that I posed in the last slide. So one is truly aligning on strategy and purely, truly documenting and defining who your ideal customer profile is, what the data points that go into it, and your approach on lead nurture and qualification. Automating engagement from marketing nurture to initial sales outreach will definitely take some stress off of the resources that you have internally. And having a really aligned handoff will also help you overcome these challenges too. So once you're aligned on what exactly a sales ready lead means, and you're aligned on how much material they've seen, and you align on messaging, an aligned handoff is really going to make that transition from marketing to sales much more seamless. Okay, so step one is really defining your strategy. So this is the way that I always think about campaign frameworks. There's four different parts of this, and this is probably, what you do, but it might be some kind of amalgamation of this. So I like to break this up into four really unique phases of different campaigns. Number one is identify. We identify the goal, we identify the ICPs, we identify the KPIs, all the acronyms that you need, the ROIs, like what does it mean? What do you want to do? Why are you going to do it? And what does success mean? That's really what you want to identify first. It's a step that people often skip and they just jump right to execute, but identify is one of the most critical stages for setting yourself up for success. Number two is prepare. So prepare is when you are actually creating the content and you're creating the collateral and you're having meetings to align on, the different strategies that you've identified during the identify stage. So, do you have what you need when this flood of leads shows up? Do you have your messaging in place for when you have leads that are ready to be passed from marketing to sales? Preparation is really critical as well. And then, of course, we get into execution. So this is where you launch your campaign. You pull your lead list out and you drop them into the nurture campaign that we're going to talk about. This is where you're actually running your paid ads that you're retargeting with and things like that. And then, of course, number four is optimize. So you've defined your KPIs and identify. Now let's go look at those KPIs. Let's look at what the story, the data is telling us and see what we can do to optimize. Essentially, here would be the conversion rate between funnel stages, but also, are there subject lines that we can optimize, or is one email getting really high open rate, but not a very high click rate? So, different ways to optimize is really step four. And then you can repeat this as you expand. But, this is really foundational to what you're trying to do in this campaign. So the first step is to identify. So really, we want to be able to actually define the ICP. If you ask anybody in your company, they might give you a different answer of who's truly an ideal customer and what does that profile look like. So taking all those different considerations into account and getting it all documented and data backed is really critical. So this is how it kind of has three different parts to it. First, of course, you need to establish the criteria. So it's one thing to be able to describe, your ideal customer profile. There's somebody who buys 3 times in 1 year and their rate is this and they care about this. That is not really data driven. So you need something that's established in data that you can capture in HubSpot. So industry, company size, what are their pain points? What are the solutions that you have for those pain points? And then, of course, internally aligned. So once you've established the criteria, make sure that the rest of the stakeholders also agree with it. And if they don't, then you got to run with something specific so that you can either prove or disprove your theories about your initial criteria. And then you actually identify your targets. So where are these leads coming from? Are they specific companies? Are there regions? All of those kinds of things that take into account when it comes to targeting, identifying who your targets are. Maybe you have a higher priority of this criteria that you've established, and then you have some lower ranking criteria too. So they can all be treated as the same, or you can rank them in order of most important. So, the output of this step is really to have your ICP description, and optional is ranked list of target accounts or target attributes that these different kinds of accounts would have. So some best practices is really to enhance and clean your existing database. So you don't have to run out and buy a whole new tool in order to, infuse a whole bunch of new leads. Take a look at what you have first, and then go and fill in the gaps. That's usually what we talk about. So leverage your ICP and target account insights that are all in HubSpot first. So take a look at your data. You can definitely use AI to fill in some CRM gaps. Maybe you have a whole bunch of accounts in your system that don't have industry or don't have revenue or don't have employee count. Fill that all in so that way you can truly see the volume of your ICP within your existing database. Then you can segment your existing contacts as well. So, this is where, you can either assign different industry groups to different, departments in your system, or however you kind of want to think about that. And then finally, if you need to generate net new prospects out of, in your system, if your volume in your tool isn't large enough, use ZoomInfo, 6sense, Apollo.io, whatever tool that you have access to. There's a lot of like industry specific tools as well, to source some cold contacts that you can then outreach as well. A lot of these kinds of tools also have enrichment kind of functionality as well. So if you upload a list of clients that you are, contacts or companies that you have in HubSpot today, you can enrich and fill in the gaps that you might be missing, like industry or revenue or employee size or employee count. Okay, and then you move on to your prepare steps. So we're going to kind of go through number one here in the next slide as well, but this is kind of what that looks like. So map your buyer personas and map the journey of how you want them to go through the different kinds of content and collateral that you have. Develop your messaging based on the pain points that you see generally throughout these ones, whether it's, you want to focus on what the problem is, not just what your product or service solves for. And then, of course, you have to align your content to that. So a lot of the time you have the content that you need, but sometimes you'll need to create net new content in order to align with these first two. So at the end of the day, you're going to have your content library of emails and webinar recordings and ebooks and white papers and case studies that align to your ICP. And then another part of this prepare is set up your HubSpot. So, align your funnel, revisit your funnel stages. So revisit the definitions of your funnel stages, redefine, if you need to redefine anything, do that, reset anybody in your database that might be in the wrong position, and then make sure that you also lean into the automation that is native inside of HubSpot as well to make sure that as they go along in their journey, that they get updated to the correct funnel stage per the definitions that you've selected during this stage. And then you also want to map the customer journey to these funnel stages. So we're going to get into each piece of this during the execution phase of this, but this is the way that I like to do it. So if someone's brand new and cold lead to your HubSpot database, we'll set them as a prospect. HubSpot's native is a subscriber, like the very, very top of the funnel. We usually change it to prospect because we think that aligns a little bit better. We're going to apply a fit score that we're going to talk about. This is one where it can just kind of double check your filters when it comes to either the existing database that you have or the net new leads that you've pulled in. If they are a good fit, we'll move them up to lead. And that's when they'll start to get some marketing nurture emails. As different marketing campaigns go out, you can apply an engagement score as they click and open and fill out forms and engage with CTAs and engage with content. Once that engagement score is high enough, that's when you can mark them as a sales ready lead and get them passed over to sales because they've gone through 2 layers of initial qualification. They fit your ICP and they're engaged enough to be passed over to sales. Okay, and then that's all at the prepare phase. So you get all of that ready and you have that truly identified, and then you go and you actually start to build it in HubSpot. So this is what we do. First, we set up the fit score. So this is where you turn your ICP definitions into properties in HubSpot, or pull them in as properties in HubSpot into fit score. So HubSpot's brand new fit score and lead scores, if you haven't seen them yet, they are worlds apart from the original HubSpot score that has always existed in HubSpot. This has been around for about a year now, but this is so robust and they add new features to this all the time. But these are some of the most common filters. So when we're talking about company and contacts is a bit of a mix, title, company size, industry, sometimes location, annual revenue, and maybe your tech stack too. So a lot of these third-party like database tools have what their tech stack is. So if they align with something inside of your products and services, it's a good, that's a really good way to do that. So of course, that's what you have to do first. And then you run your list of target accounts and target ICPs through this to understand who's in your database and who should be brought over to the next step. So the next step will be to send them into your nurture emails. So essentially, once you've applied your fit score and that fit score is high enough, then we'll kind of, move them into the next funnel stage of lead, because now they are truly a qualified lead, at least on the surface or, on paper. And then we'll want to also send them to the workflow that we're going to send out a bunch of marketing emails for.
Laura, can I just jump in?
Yeah.
We just had a question come up
Yeah.
for, should you be creating separate models or fit scores for your different ICPs? What does that look like? How do you actually kind of make the decisions between a larger model or more segmented ones?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So let me go back to that slide. So I would think about the different filters and what kind of overlap there is between them, because you can kind of have 2 different strategies with this. So if you have, very different products or services or segments of the market that you're going after, and there's next to no overlap between them, I would definitely recommend building out more than one fit score. I think with Pro, you get 5 different fit scores, and with Enterprise, you might get more, but you have the option to create more than one score in HubSpot. So if you have, depending on how much overlap there is between your different ICP, the profiles that you've identified, what we usually do is we start with one and we see how, like, the story that the data tells us, and if people who we would expect to be qualified are not qualified based on this fit score, that's when we would create different kinds of segments in that and create different scores. Awesome. Good question. Okay, so then the nurture email that you want to drop them into. So the idea behind this nurture workflow is that you have, relatively customized messaging to your ICP. You branch based on engagement, so you can send out additional emails if they haven't opened the previous emails. And we can, run all kinds of A/B tests and things like that if your sample size is large enough. But we like to set up this kind of marketing nurture. So the kind of content that's in here is really evergreen and it can be kind of industry agnostic, because you're just trying to educate your market. You're trying to drum up some brand awareness, drum up some demands, drum up some curiosity in order to essentially draw engagement, so that engagement scores start to fill in. We've done a whole webinar on this specifically about exactly how to build these and kind of my thought process beside how I like to build these out for clients. So we'll send these slides out, of course, after, and that little button right there will link to that webinar for more details on that. But if there's any specific questions that you guys have about this nurture workflow, I'm happy to answer these at the end of this session as well. All right. And then as this nurture workflow is running, you want to be able to track engagement and score based on that too. So, these are just some of the common filters. There's a lot more available in this engagement score, but emails, opens and clicks, website pages, form submissions, webinar registration or attendees, chatbot interactions is really great. Meetings booked. You can really track a lot of different engagement points within this engagement score. But the idea is that this will align to the ABM campaign that you're running from a marketing perspective and bubble up the most engaged leads that you will then send to sales. So because of that, once that engagement score is high enough, now you can mark them as an MQL or a qualified lead. If you've worked with me, we've mushed the marketing qualified and sales qualified leads together. And that's when we will send them to sales. So if you have enterprise, we can just enroll them right into a sequence. And if you have pro, then we would have to just do a manual step with that. But the idea is that you have leads that fit your ICP and leads that are highly engaged. Those are ones that are truly ready for sales outreach. And then this is also the pretty cool thing too. So if you can use dynamic sequences in HubSpot as well. So if you haven't looked at dynamic sequences yet, they're really cool, especially for this kind of campaign that we're talking about. So dynamic sequences are or let me back up. Workflows in HubSpot are to send out marketing emails and update data. The sequences are one-to-one sales emails and calls and different kinds of engagement steps that are one-to-one that come from sales. From here, these dynamic sequences are really cool because you can set them up so a bunch of automated sales one-to-one emails will go out to the prospects that have become, engaged enough that they're now at this step. And once they start engaging with those automated emails, the dynamic sequence automatically converts over to a rep-led series of steps. So you can, spin up your automated emails to get sent out so that sales still isn't truly involved yet because they're not taking manual action. And then once somebody has continued to show interest with sales emails, that's when you convert to the sales rep calling them and sending them LinkedIn messages and sending much more specific personalized emails through manual steps. So this is really an added benefit of using, more than one HubSpot tool within this kind of campaign. All right, and then how do you optimize this and how do you measure these kinds of results? So these are just a couple of different reports that we can spin up that are really focused on these kinds of campaigns. So, one of the biggest KPIs that you're looking for is funnel velocity and the conversion rate between different stages. And then the rates going up and down between each of these stages can really drive how you go and you sort these out. So if the conversion rate from prospects up at the very top to lead is actually really low, and remember that is set by your fit score. So that means that maybe your filters in ZoomInfo aren't tight enough or don't align very well to your ICP. So if you're pulling out 100 people from ZoomInfo and only 30 of them are fitting your ICP, you need to get back into ZoomInfo and adjust your filters. If there are fewer people that are moving from lead to qualified lead to MQL, then that means that maybe the emails that you have in your workflow aren't engaging enough, or maybe you're not sending frequently enough, sending emails frequently enough or something like that. And then if no one's converting from qualified lead to an opportunity, that may mean that your sales engagement automations aren't working as well as you could, or maybe they're not specific enough to the pain points that they're really dealing with so that you're not generating enough interest to actually book a meeting and create a deal, a true opportunity with your clients. So what we recommend is, checking in with these KPIs at least monthly. If not, you don't want to look at it every day or you won't see too much of a change, but at least monthly, really start to look at the different conversion rates between and see how your fit score is over time and how your engagement score looks over time as well. And then as you learn new things from the data, then you can update your scoring accordingly. So maybe you drop one of your ICP, definitions. Maybe one of those target audiences isn't working out very well, so you drop one of those and you really double down on some of the other higher priority ones. Or maybe you're adjusting your maybe you're adding new emails to your workflow, so you need to add those into your engagement score. So quarterly, at least, checking on the scoring is really critical too. But you also have to be patient. You have to give it time for the data to kind of catch up and for people to work their way through the campaign in order to understand, what's really going on.
Laura, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Always trying to find the right time to jump in.
Yeah.
But another question came through. What sort of results have you seen after building this? Biggest impacts that you've kind of witnessed as you've built this out for a couple clients now?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And I wish I had something more specific to point to, but we've really only created this true process just within the last couple months. So we've rolled this out for about 5 or 6 clients at this point, but it's a little too early to tell to actually point to this is how it's successful. So, people are still like working their way through the nurture campaign and through sequences. So it's still a little bit early to tell, but I can't wait to like give it another 2 or 3 months and write a blog post or just have a follow-up webinar and kind of share some more results when it comes to this. So I hope that's okay to answer like that, but I don't really have an answer yet.
No, it's we love honest answers. What about just general like efficiency, like feedback in general?
Yeah.
Like what has been the team impact here?
Yeah. So it's a lot to it's a little bit to set up at first, because when we work with clients on this, we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to the operational build in HubSpot, but usually people get a little bit bogged down in like the new content creation. But Zach and I have been working with people a lot on how to leverage AI both in HubSpot and outside of HubSpot to help you like generate new content, at least in a draft version, in order to, tweak what you have to fit your ICP better, come up with different versions of that. Or, maybe you have like a product one sheet, or how do you turn that into a blog post that can go into a nurture workflow? So that seems to be the only place that people get hung up on a little bit. But once all of that prepare stage is done, until you come back to review, it's kind of a set it and forget it and watch what happens and watch these numbers change over time. That way it's only a couple of hours a month of work, because you're reviewing and updating anything if you need to, but you're not just constantly trying to spin up new content and reach new ICPs and spraying and praying and hoping it sticks. Now you've got a much more systematic way to go about it. That's truly just set it and forget it until you go to review your KPIs.
Amazing. Another question that came through, quick question on sequences, might be business specific, but do you recommend marketing or sales owns the sequence, building, execution, all the way through like analysis and performance? Definitely like a big question. Or how have you seen this be most successful?
Yeah, very good question. So I would say it's sequence messaging specifically is going to be a collaboration between sales and marketing. So what I've seen, there's always that dichotomy between marketing and sales of, there's always a little bit of friction there, but aligning on the messaging and aligning on the ICP will help reduce that friction by far. So what I would always suggest is that marketing is the one that's really standing it up, but the salesperson has kind of the final say on how it's actually written or signed off. That way it sounds like it's actually coming from them and not from the corporate voice. And it has like the language and the jargon that like an individual would use, of course, while staying on brand and staying professional. But, if someone would, if marketing writes an email and signs it off, like, kindest regards, but if this SDR would never, ever sign off their email like that, they should have the flexibility to put their own spin on it. But when it comes to the core messaging, I'm in the camp of marketing should really own that.
I will riff off of that if I can. In that I think specifically, as we explore internally at Accellent, how we can actually leverage AI more, how we can really kind of, increase our productivity, but also stay aligned to our true voice. I think having that collaboration specifically from a sequence perspective will more so allow you to kind of like stand out in the crowd. I think we are all in tune with some of the more AI generated content that can be created, which is phenomenal. But being able to really allow your team to put on their own tone and voice to it will allow it to resonate more and build trust a little bit sooner. So I definitely stand in that camp too.
Yep, I totally agree.
Another
Awesome.
one, hubs and tiers, like just nuts and bolts of this. What do folks need if they want to go dive in and get this going today?
Yeah, good question. So, you have to have Marketing Hub in order to do any of this because you need to have access to marketing emails and lead scoring. Those are kind of like full stop. You have to have those. It's really great to have Sales Hub because then you can leverage the dynamic sequences and you can leverage the automation that will move contacts through the workflow into a sequence as well. So I mentioned before too that enrolls contact into sequence as a Sales Hub enterprise tool. But our workaround for the Sales Hub Pro clients is we just have like a task that gets generated for the salesperson to just manually enroll that person into a specific sequence. So it's an extra step, but it's not, too cumbersome as long as there's not a huge volume of them. So there's that aspect of it. So all you really need is marketing. Sales Hub is a huge added bonus, but I definitely recommend having some kind of sales outreach tool, even if it's within, you'll need a sync to Salesforce or a sync to Outreach or SalesLoft or whatever kind of sales outreach tool you have if your CRM is not HubSpot.
Fantastic. I'm going to throw kind of just one of my own questions, which is where should teams start? If you are interested there, people are going to be at varying levels of
Yeah.
identify, prepare, execute. Step one or something, a piece of advice you would kind of give people to get going.
Yeah. So we were kind of talking about this the other day too, where we have clients that have really general ICPs or they're like, I just know I want to sell to these 5 different industries. And then we have the other side where they know everything about the person who actually uses or buys the product. And they say, they care about this and they've got this much education and they have like a truly persona identification. You got to find like that's kind of the spectrum of different places where people start with their ICP. So this is usually an iterative kind of thing, but you have to tie those two sides together and come up with the part that actually is data specific. So it's good to have that persona so that you can write content to that. And it's important to know what industries or revenue or size of company you want to go after. But you also have to identify the data that goes into properties because fit score is completely property driven. So you have to have the data in HubSpot on companies and contacts in order for the fit score to work at all. And that's a really critical part of this because then you're really only focused on your ICP rather than just kind of everybody in your general list. Everybody in your general list should get marketed to, but that's, newsletters and webinar invites and we're going to this event. But when you're talking about really driving pipeline and you're driving funnel volume and conversion rates between that, we see a lot of benefit in getting more specific.
Amazing. Wonderful. I'll give 30, that 30 seconds is a lot, but last call for questions. If anyone wants to send anything else through, have at it. Laura, I'll let you kind of do a closing, but I'll do my housekeeping. Everyone will be receiving the recording of this, so be prepared for that later today. If you have any questions, reach out to the team in general, or if you are for any of the folks on the call who are currently or historically working with us, if you have any interest in kind of building this up, just reach out to your account strategist. Our whole team is very knowledgeable in this process, but Laura is definitely our expert here. And thank you for joining us. Amazing.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming.